Hello, Epic here. Today I want to explore central bank digital currency, also known as CBDC. So, I guess the question is, what exactly is central bank digital currency? Well, a CBDC is a virtual money backed and issued by central bank. Back in uh, 2018, 2019, if someone were to mention CBDC or even the words such as Great Reset or New Financial System, they would have been laughed at, even labeled as nonsense, conspiracy theory. So anyway, here we are. We come a long way since then, and the fact is that in May of 2020, we only had perhaps 35 countries that were looking into CBDCs. And now, as we fast forward today, September 2022, we now have over 112 countries to be exact, representing more than 95% of the global GDP exploring the CBDC. And interestingly, 50 countries are now in advanced phase of the exploration, and 14 of those countries have been piloting CBDCs. So let that sink in for a second. So basically, we had a pandemic narrative taking place in 2020, March 2020. That's when we declared pandemic. And while a little over 100 countries, I guess in midst of the pandemic, prioritize CBDC. That's interesting. Basically, while everyone's looking at one way, I guess they sneak in something right under our nose. And here we are. We have 100 plus countries now developing CBDC. So you're probably wondering why CBDC? Don't we already have a digital dollar? Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, true to some extent. We already have a. I mean, we live in the digital world, and where our dollars are digital. I mean, we can easily pull up our bank account, apps, websites, and transact, send, receive dollars. We can essentially transact at ease. Even internationally, we can perform transaction. Sure, for international transaction, sure, it may take maybe, a week or two, or even costs us 10 to 15% of the fee, but it's certainly possible. In a way, we do have we live in a digital world and we do transact digital. But anyway, the transacting digitally is possible, and it may be true, but it's really not true digital. It's simply a ledger that is maintained by your bank, or even third-party companies, and it offers ease and familiar simplicity in transaction. But it does, and of course, it does have a little bit of cost, but it's not true digital. And this is exactly where digital currency comes in play. We know we have thousands of digital currencies now, right? Most common one of all, the king of those is cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. Well, technically, Bitcoin is not a currency. It's actually a money that behaves similar to gold and silver. And Bitcoin is widely known and fully decentralized cryptocurrency. Other types of cryptocurrencies are, we can say, stablecoin, whose values are pegged to assets, such as the fiat currency like dollar or euro. Uh, Most common one is USDT, USDC, and whatnot. And And these cryptocurrency runs on distributed ledger technology, meaning that multiple devices all around the world, not just one central hub, are constantly verifying the accuracy of these transactions, right? But this is different from central bank digital currency, and that is why countries want to deploy CBDC, so that they have the full control and it's not decentralized, or it's not controlled by banks or any entity that that would control the stable coins. So thinking about CBDC, let's take a look at the map and get an idea of where the CBDCs are being deployed. So for instance, if we look at this map here, as you can see, we have 112 countries currently are in process of either researching, developing, piloting, or even launch CBDC. So if we look at the legend here, we have 11 countries that have already launched CBDCs, and that's in Bahamas. There's some countries there. We have Jamaica, who has already launched. We have Nigeria, who has also launched. So we have 11 countries that have already implemented CBDC. And looking at the map, the green represent the pilot phase. So on the northern eastern side of the Asia, we have countries that are piloting the CBDC. So we have Russia, we have China, we have Kazakhstan, and then here we have South Africa, and then Saudi Arabia are also piloting so-called CBDCs. And then this light blue color here represent countries in development phase of the CBDC. So we have Australia here, we have India, we have Iran, Turkey, EU, Canada, Brazil, Venezuela, and various other small countries are in development phase. And then as far as the research phase, we have 47 countries are still doing a research. And interestingly, US is still doing research. Maybe it makes sense, since US dollar is the global reserve. Perhaps it doesn't want to transition into a new I guess new global reserve. Makes sense. They'll be the one to resist the most. But interesting, they are still researching. There are a handful of countries: US, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Paraguay, Pakistan, Philippines. We have a handful of countries still on the research phase of it. But anyway, if we look at this map and if we look at how many countries are developing CBDC, it's not a question of if we'll have a CBDC. I think this is a question of when we'll have CBDC. While some countries are already advanced phase and already launching CBDC, there are still countries out there that are still doing research and development as we figure out how to transition and roll out and implement this CBDC. So anyway, this is a global, I guess the way I look at it is that this is a global joint effort by central bank, if you ask me. I think they know exactly what direction they need to go, and in order to implement these new financial systems, right? So with that comes a question, and you're probably wondering, why would government want to get in on digital currency, the CBDC? And that's a good question, because, well, the truth is that there are many reasons and motives behind why country wants to implement CBDCs, and the reasons and motives will vary from country to country. So what I mean by that is, for example, emerging countries where most people are unbanked may want CBDC so that everyone have a safer access to money, right? Basically, the unbanked population. On the flip side, the high cost country may want CBDC to prevent fraud, right? They probably want to have a full transparency in where the money flows, and perhaps I would even argue that CBDC uh, I would even argue that CBDC reason one that they will not admit is the control. With CBDC, they can directly engage with someone, right, without using bank as a middle layer. I mean, they can directly engage and transact with people, and essentially, they can, if they want, force them to do how they see fit. So, for example, they can charge tax directly. They can force spending, they can force saving, they could control where and how much they can spend, and of course, each and every transaction are visible to them, and therefore no privacy. Of course, there is no privacy. Anyway, my analogy on this topic on CBDC is no different than how I see inflation. For example, what I mean by that is inflation is perhaps good for a country, but it's not necessarily good for individual, right? Countries can print money, they can cause inflation so that they can wipe off their large debt. And I guess for country that's good, but for individual that is not good, right? Because all of a sudden, country can print money, increase money supply, and as a result of purchasing power would decrease. And for individual, that is not good. So CBDC would likely have a similar properties as inflation. I guess it may be a good for a country, but not necessarily good for individual. So the question in my mind is that how can we protect against CBDC, right? And well, the truth be told here is that I think it's too late to stop it. Over the coming years, or rather we like it or not, CBDC is coming. And the fact that we have 100 plus country developing and some are even piloting phase, there is no question of if, it's a question of when in my mind. So one way I suppose we could protect would be to have a hard asset that is outside of a traditional system. The example could be gold, silver, Bitcoin. It could offer a mechanism to transact outside of CBDC system. And secondly, while the world transition from traditional system to a new system, it may even offer a hedge against all the uncertainty that comes with it. I mean, just remember, 1 ounce of silver or 1 ounce of gold, uh, is 1 ounce, meaning 1 ounce of gold is 1 ounce of gold, 1 ounce of silver is 1 ounce of silver, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. So, no matter what the volatility is, in measured in fiat, the underlying asset is still underlying asset. So as we transition the underlying currency that we use to measure, like for example, we could use the US dollar or euro, or any fiat currency to measure 1 ounce of gold or 1 ounce of silver or one Bitcoin. Uh, it will likely be volatile, but remember, 1 ounce is 1 ounce. So anyway, this brings a question: what kind of risk will implementing CBDC pose? And I think if the countries were to implement CBDC, I think there are a handful of risks that we have to consider. One is volatility in fiat, right? Volatility in fiat currency. What I mean by that is price or the value of the fiat currency may dramatically increase or decrease depending on supply and demand, right? So, if we're transitioning from traditional system to a new system, then countries will likely abuse their power and print money like crazy. Uh, the company may choose to hold their reserve in different asset other than US dollar, thereby creating less demand, right? So as a result of shift in demand and supply, there will be volatility in the base currency. And that's one of the risks. Another risk I can think of as far as implementing CBDC would be, I guess, the supply of the fiat currency, right? It may increase significantly. And the fact is that, US, the central bank printed 40% of its money supply in the last 2 years, right? Since the pandemic, we printed 40% of the money supply. Uh, the US dollar has been around for 100 plus years, and in its lifespan, we printed 40% of it just in the last 2 years. Let that sink in for a second. I think, why would we do such thing, right? I mean, well, I guess if we know we are transitioning to a new system, I guess new CBDC or new financial system, I guess then why not, right? I mean, if we know the old dollar will go away, then I guess it makes sense. If hell, if I'm declaring bankruptcy tomorrow, then why wouldn't I go out and take out a loan, right? So I guess it's a similar concept there. Anyway, back to what are some of the risks on implementing CBDC. Another one I could think of is run for the bank, right? With volatility, with fear, uncertainty, people may choose to take their money out of the bank, and if so, then that could trigger a run to a bank. We already seen that happen recently in China, for example, where people wanted to take their money out of bank and they weren't enough money to go around. So that itself can create a panic and endless loop where people just wants their money out. What else? Another risk of CBDC would be cyber attack, right? Meaning if countries were to declare war and then they want, I mean, I guess number one target obviously would be the CBDC, right? That would be their top choice for target. Uh, so I guess the modern war over the next couple of decades is not necessarily tanks and firearm and drone. I think it could very well be financial attack using CBDC. One country will try to knock off the other country's CBDC, form of a cyber attack. And finally, what else? The biggest concern I have with CBDC is I guess the regulatory and privacy concern. Meaning, if there is no cash to spend, there is no coins, there is no green paper fiat money, and only way to transact is using the CBDC, then that also means that all of a sudden we have no privacy, right? If I were to go grocery shopping or if I were to go spend any of my money, it would essentially create a ledger that is visible to central bank, right? So in essence, there is no privacy, and I think that's the biggest concern that I have, is the lack of privacy. Anyway, this was an interesting topic on CBDC, and uh, just to summarize here, as we, I guess, transition from our debt-based system into this new, I guess, new financial system. Uh, the one thing is certain, that CBDC is coming, whether we like it or not. Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. I mean, as we can see here, we have 100 plus countries already uh, in phase of, researching, developing, and even piloting and launching the CBDC. So with that comes questions of, are you prepared? And how prepared are you for this change? Are you prepared to face all the risk and opportunity that comes with it? And frankly, I don't know what exactly will happen. But one thing for sure, the hard assets that gold, silver, and Bitcoin will play a critical role as we transition, and perhaps even more important role for those who value freedom, privacy, and direct or indirect risk as a result of the CBDC. So, as always, stay humble, stack silver, and thanks for watching. And please support the channel by subscribing. Thanks. Epic out.